My C3 Corvette was almost 50 years old when I decided to make it a whole lot better by modernizing it with current tech. While the end product is very good, what if all the upgrades weren't done and it could be even better? The genesis for modernizing my C3 was rooted in bringing performance and reliability to be on par with my C8 Corvette. This car is the total package. I can take it to the track on the weekend, or I can take it to Starbucks on my way to work. It does both of these things equally well, and this was the inspiration for me to modernize my C3 with current tech. You can see all these changes in my other video, Modernizing a Classic Corvette, and I'll share a link here. And now that it's been a couple years, I want to share with you how the upgrades have been working with real-world use, and some additional plans I have to make this thing even better. Okay, to start things out, I received a tremendous amount of feedback from the first video on my custom sheet metal dash. And a few times I read your comments and I actually laughed out loud, so thanks for that. And I think it's safe to say most of you aren't fans of it. Well, now that I've had some more time with it, I can share that I'm not much of a fan of it either. Yes, an industrial look on a C3 doesn't really work, does it? And it only took 2 years for me to figure that out, right? But in all honesty, I have no regrets, right? You learn from trial and error, and getting the modernized tech into the dashboard was a priority, but now that I've driven it, I can honestly say I miss having the original looking 68 to 82 dashboard. So that being said, I'm going to be reverting this back to the original dash panels here, but I'm going to be retaining the center console here. So there'll still be a bit of customization to meld the original dash with the sheet metal. But I think it can be done. And another important topic here is I'm going to be retaining the tech. I'm not going back to old school mechanical gauges. I'm going to be keeping the GPS functionality and then making that work in the original form factor. Now, unfortunately, my 1977 OEM dash pad is cracked, as is my passenger cover panel. So I'm going to go ahead and replace these with OEM reproductions. There are a few different places you can get these materials from, and most of the time I use Corvette Central. So they have a great website, and they offer all kinds of reproduction parts for all eras of Corvettes, C1 to C8. So if you have a Corvette also and you need some parts, make sure you check them out. Okay, next let's talk about the OD transmission upgrade, overdrive. So again, I put in a Tremec TKO 600 and mine has been excellent. There's no notchiness to the shifting. It's smooth shifting all the time. In fact, I think a lot of the haters out there that have shifting issues with TKOs might have an issue with pilot bearing alignment versus like the synchros or something, because really I haven't had any problems, and I've been rough on it a few times too. But my only complaint with the transmission is fourth gear, and it's really not the transmission's fault. It's more the rear end gears I have in the car, and let me explain some more here. The rear end gear ratio on this car is 3.7 to 1, and the tire size is 255/60 R15, and together that gear ratio and this tire size make fourth gear unusable. And what I mean is when I'm driving through a residential neighborhood at say 30 miles an hour, the engine RPM is too low for fourth gear to be usable. And when I'm out on a highway, say 40 to 50 miles an hour, the engine RPM is then too high. And in those cases, I usually shift into overdrive, and then I do my best not to lug the engine. Further compounding things when driving in overdrive and fourth gear is actually the cooling capacity of the engine, the cooling capability, how about that? And what I mean is at lower RPM, this water pump spins slower. And even at 40 to 50 miles an hour where you're getting a lot of airflow, the engine starts to overheat. And it has nothing to do with cooling capacity. This is a 4-core radiator, but for this 4-core radiator to work well, you got to be able to pump the coolant through at a sufficient rate too. So the high level takeaway, different gears in the rear end are going to fix my issue. So for round 2 of the upgrades, I'm planning to improve fourth gear by replacing the 370 to 1 rear end gears with 355 to 1 gears. And I think that's going to be the sweet spot here, necessary to get RPM where it needs to be to cruise at 40 to 45, and then make that fourth gear more usable. This seems like a very minor change, and it is, but the upgrades I've made to my C3 are all about optimizing it for daily use. Being able to cruise at intermediate speeds in fourth gear is an important part of the driver experience, and that's why I'm planning the gear changes. Another change I have planned for round 2 of the updates is to remove the power steering power valve and hydraulic and replace it with a rack and pinion setup. So first, got to give props to the YouTube community here. So when I was kind of lamenting the poor handling a C3 has, they said, check out rack and pinion steering kits. And I did, and they're a real thing, and it's something I'm going to give a try. So the reason I'm excited to try it is the OEM power valve that came in all C3 Corvettes, it has a dead spot. And when you're at speed, say 60 miles an hour on the highway, you're always having to make subtle corrections to keep the car in the lane. And is it a big deal? No, it's not, but it's just a subtle annoyance that, you know, as part of improving this car, making it more fun to drive and wanting to drive it more or modernizing it, it's something I want to eliminate. And I think moving to a rack and pinion steering setup is really going to be the best way I can do that. It's also worth knowing that I've rebuilt the steering box already and the worm gear is adjusted correctly. In addition, I did replace the rag joint also when I rebuilt the steering column, and in spite of doing these things, I still have the dead spot. So this is largely driving me to go ahead and try a rack setup. Okay, another change I'm planning to make is to remove the 9-leaf steel spring in the rear end and replace that with the fiberglass leaf. So why am I doing that? So first, much like the steering, the suspension is fine. There's not an issue with it. But to take this car to the next level and smooth out the ride, I think moving to a fiberglass leaf is going to help that. And in addition, a little benefit to the fiberglass leaves is I do believe you get a more consistent spring rate. And technically, I think that you'll get a little better handling. So again, not doing that necessarily to make this car handle better, but it's more just to improve the ride of the car and make it even better. There are a bunch of aftermarket composite leaf suppliers out there, and I'm going to target a spring rate that optimizes cruising comfort because I really don't plan on autocrossing or racing this car anytime soon. And a PSA, exhaust shields become very important when you install a fiberglass leaf because fiberglass does not tolerate excessive heat well. So if you add a composite leaf spring, make sure you have plenty of clearance to the exhaust. Some other changes I have on deck include fixing the headlights. So I did wire for these, but unfortunately they don't actuate. The vacuum canisters are bad. And I'm going to move to one of the motor-based electronic actuating setups. I'm also going to be adding some trim behind the rear seats. I've never had that, and this is just about finishing out the interior to make it look nice. I'm also going to upgrade the Android tablet and the radio to a single CarPlay head unit. And the only reason I didn't do this first time around was I do have the Edelbrock ProFlow fuel injection, and I wanted access to that app. And unfortunately at the time, that app was not available on iOS. So now that it is available, that unlocks that functionality for just a default CarPlay head unit. I'm also looking at LED lights throughout, headlights, the hazard lights. I think that would be a great upgrade. And last, I'm excited to give this car a new paint job. So the paint is showing its age, and some of the body work was not that good either. So I'm going to plan to fix some of that stuff and lay down a nice, clean, fresh coat of emerald green paint or something close. Because right now, I think it looks great. Okay, one last thing to share here is that in spite of me nitpicking the car and sharing some things I still don't like about it, overall, the total package is still very good. And I have zero regrets making all the changes I made in the first video. So you learn from trial and error, and I'm learning a lot about this car right now. And also, I do appreciate all the feedback you've been giving me. A lot of good ideas, so keep it coming. All right, well, if you want to see where the project's going to go, make sure you subscribe. And that's all I have for today, so thanks for watching.